Most imaging service lines are revenue generating, just like pharmacy, just like lab, but people see and fully acknowledge the value you create and will still convince you that you're not valuable. And then you accept that.
Welcome to the show. We're here because we're curious about medical imaging or have a hunger to learn more. What can we learn from each other, and how should we prepare to tackle the challenges ahead? I'm Chris St. John, and join me today as we rethink imaging, a podcast by Imalogics. Welcome back to Rethink Imaging. I'm Chris St. John. My guest today is Brandon Smith. Brandon is an RT, a GE healthcare senior clinical instructor, and the only person in ASRT history to serve 2 presidential terms, the second one recently through a special election. He came up through vascular interventional, earned dual master's degrees, crossed into imaging informatics, and built a career that runs the IR suite and vendor floor to the ASRT boardroom. His presidency has been defined by concrete output: the BC campaign with national TV placement, an OMB reclassification petition that generated 42,000 comments, the Invisible Heroes 5K, and a consistent argument that good intentions without execution are not enough. Brandon is one of the most refreshingly direct people I've talked to on this show. He doesn't dodge questions, there's no corpo speak, and not saying that our other guests do, but he just has a way of reframing things that everyone in the field talks about and makes you see them from a different perspective. The tech shortage, encroachment, volunteerism, professional identity, he has strong takes on all of it, and his answers are very forthright. He comes across as somebody who is really putting in the work, not somebody who's out there collecting titles, and he's not just out there taking photos at conferences. He's very open about the difference between showing up and actually moving things forward, and he holds himself to that standard. Brandon is a powerful speaker with a lot of strong opinions, and I think there's a lot to be gained from listening to this episode. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Rethink Imaging. As I just said, in the future, today I am joined by Brandon Smith. Brandon, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to have you. And so, obviously I want to focus on you, your own career accomplishments, but given that you have like a familial connection, I would be remiss if we just didn't start there to kind of tracing your history back. And so I believe your father was involved in medical imaging in the late 80s. And originally, you were intrigued by the profession, but, were potentially going to follow another path. And then you eventually came back to imaging. Can you tell me like a little bit about your detour and what drew you back into the imaging world?
Oh yeah, sure. So my dad entered the field in the late 80s. He went to a hospital-based program. But of course, like any child, especially a son, it's like, I'm gonna do my own thing. And so I did, and went off to school and it's a whole nother path in engineering. But at some point I took an externship with neuroimaging. And so I realized, something I was really fascinated with. I had grown up around it. And so, just kind of went from there, like legitimately decided to take a shift. And there was some people that were upset, but I've always been pretty decisive in my ability to make a decision. And, my grades were to a point where, I was academically really supporting and funding school myself. And so my parents didn't have to pay for it. And so I decided I was going to make a big boy decision, and I did.
So you like went down the engineering path, and then you said you had it was an externship. And then, so at what point what was like your entry point back into imaging? You went back to school for it.
Okay, got you. So after I did the externship, because my dad was working in research, he wasn't doing traditional patient care. And so I went to where he was. And just for the summer, just getting into some things. And I was like, yeah, I think I really prefer, like I felt a sense of inspiration there that I didn't feel. I didn't I don't think I felt as driven. To be honest, I could do it. I was succeeding in it, but it's like I feel kind of blah. And so I, end up jumping into it. And I don't think he was. He would say, my dad would argue, he probably was not a big proponent of promoting the field in that way because, I mean, think about it from a parent's perspective. Regardless of how lucrative it may have been for you or successful your career may have been, if you've taken it that it was more laborious, then you're probably not going to encourage your child to do it. And so we actually have conversations today about how his view of the professional initially and then his view of the profession through watching me has become is a totally different perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious. Can you tell me a little bit about like about that perspective shift?
Sure, almost 100%. So I think initially, it was about sustainability. It was about taking care of your family. It was about it being a less lengthy path, but still a quality path. Like basically ready to work. And so I think he went into it initially as a job that became a career. And I've always been exposed to it as a career. So I never saw it I didn't see it in any different. And so I think I was able to be in environments where I realized it was a premier career choice, not a contingency plan.
Right. Well, and it's so interesting. I feel like the familial connection within radiology in general, but also in healthcare, like we've talked about it on the show and we see it a lot, right? Like children of nurses becoming nurses, children of doctors becoming doctors, children of techs becoming techs. And it's like, it's something that you talk about a lot publicly, but like, why do you think it is that so few people get exposed to these career paths as potential paths without the familial connection? Like why do you think it is that like without this kind of entry point, it seems like a pretty big jump for folks to get into the field?
So I think historically it has been treated as a contingency plan despite being a real career option in that, it is rich in what the development is. And I don't think it has traditionally been portrayed in that way. You see it all the time. I'm gonna keep it cute and say, well, I went to program X, but then I failed out of program X. So my counselor advised me to get into radiography. Like, why? Like you didn't make it there. This is not an easy route in. And you see that happen to a lot of personas like medical lab technologists, RTs, occupational therapy, physical therapy. They get treated like contingency plans, and that's not the case. But we've also allowed it, and you think about terms that seem harmless, but you look at it, it's like, that's not really who we are. Like, oh, you can go into an ancillary program. Like, ancillary? Do we not deliver direct patient care? Like, I'm just kind of like, I'm confused. I'm like kind of confused, like saying, yeah, we're all here. Oh, you all too. Thanks for coming. And it's like, but then you learn that it's like, you don't have to be adversaries, but you do have to educate people on who you are, like, and what that looks like. Because when you don't do it, they start to write narratives based on their limited information and become the experts in defining you. And it's so grossly incorrect. But if you're busy working with your head down, you say, well, I don't have time for that. I can't worry about that. You start to find residence in your own dissatisfaction. And they're like, this is insane. Like, you don't have to live here. Like, you do realize, like, you do not have to accept that. It's like going, I think sometimes it's like asking the airplane pilot how to navigate a cruise ship. Like, you're good at what you do. So how about you do what you do, allow me to do what I do, and we can do what we both do together.
I love that. I mean, I really like the way you put that too, like finding residence in your dissatisfaction. That And it's also like very apropos and makes me think about you and your path, who like that does not seem like your style, right? Because you have a Master of Science in Radiological Sciences, an MBA, a CIIP. You are the first, I think, ever back-to-back sitting president of the ASRT. I feel like that is the marker of somebody who is not only not taking up residence in their dissatisfaction, but in fact the very opposite, right? Like you are constantly pushing forward, you are growing, you are expanding your knowledge base, and you are educating others, right? Like it feels like, to some degree, like you've always been trying to fix these larger problems within the field. And I'm curious, like, if that's fair, number one, and if it is fair, like at what point you started seeing different problems that you wanted to try and fix?
So I'll be honest with you, I probably saw less problems than I did see the worth in the worthiness. Like I saw the opportunity. I saw the fact that, okay, well, maybe we're not happy with it, but have we really ever showed up to the fight? Like you all do realize we haven't really lost the fight. We just haven't fought. And I will argue that to anybody. Losing a fight means that we went in and we pushed and we lost. And then even when we have the perspective that we've lost, did we really show up? You can be in attendance and not be present. Did you really go into this knowing that not only you were trying to give a lick, but you would take one? Depending on how you grew up, that's going to make sense to some people and not make sense to others. And so you get to this place and you see these people changing the world every day. You see the contributions they make. You understand from an organizational business standpoint that most imaging service lines are revenue generating, just like pharmacy, just like lab. But people see and fully acknowledge the value you create and will still convince you that you're not valuable. And then you accept that. And so then you get drowned out by personas that are more commercially facing. And that's not to take away their value, but it's the social norm. There are only one or two personas that exist in hospitals. And people may argue doctors and nurses. And everybody else, classified as others unless you're in the know. And that's not to villainize physicians or nurses, but you have personas like the medical imaging professional or radiation therapists who've worked with their head down and have never required anybody to appreciate them for what they do, but have fully acknowledged that I'm dissatisfied. Well, what did you do to refuse to be ignored? No, it's just that simple. So I didn't see problems. I saw, I guess I saw, I talk in analogies.
Complacency to some degree.
You know what? I will argue this. And I've learned to talk to students like this as they are training and entering the workforce. I said, many people are going to tell you that you will meet disgruntled, angry technologists and therapists. I disagree. What you meet are people who have showed up consistently for patient care, worked with their heads down, and haven't been appreciated. So they fall into a gap. But instead of us addressing what they've been faced with, we address how they're responding. And we weren't curious enough about how they got here, not how they're acting today. They haven't always been that way.
Yeah, I mean, you have said before, right? Like the profession recognizes the contributions, but disregards us as essential contributors. Where do you think that disregard most shows up concretely? At like the hospital level, at the policy levels, that like where does that live?
All above. So when you can't talk about hospital without talking about policy. So my thing is, if appreciation for you is not evident in policies and procedures, you can keep your words, your banners, and your celebrations, because then we have a system that's not set up to promote you to be at your best. Because you have a room of decision makers that don't represent you or your expertise or understand it. So they're shooting from the hip, but it's okay because they're majority shareholders. And well, it was all right for us. And we think this is good enough for you. If you don't exist in the room, then you're not a part of the conversation. And then you can't get mad and say, well, I need a seat at a table. Understand that some of the chairs that people are occupying that belong to us, they're occupying because we weren't sitting in them. Why? Nobody's going to pay you more for sitting on this quality committee. No, I don't want to do anything outside of the department. I want to clock in and clock out. Well, that's a job. But for a career and a profession, you have to be involved in certain processes and things if you care to be an agent of change. And not even just change, but maintenance. Like, how are you contributing or influencing the ecosystem? You know, simple as that. And so I get real adamant when it comes to that because there's not a room we don't qualify to be in. Yes, our scope may be different, but our scope is not oftentimes what people define it. My argument is not that we are equal in liability or in the depth of practice, but we are equal when it comes to that. We specialize in having expertise in an area of patient care that has become very centric to patient care plans. When we talk about diagnostic imaging, and then even when you get into interventions in therapy. And so not trying to make the RT and RN, not trying to argue that RT is like these are ridiculous. Like if you want to be a nurse or a doctor, go to school and be a nurse or a doctor. But what you will not do is discount my expertise and my contributions like you running a one-man band. We're not going to do that.
Yeah. And forgive the follow-up question, right? But I mean, whatever, our listeners can know he saw the questions beforehand. Is there a culture of like quiet martyrdom in RT? And like, to what degree do you feel like the profession is complicit in its own kind of invisibility?
I don't think, I hold us accountable first. So it's our marker on the dissatisfaction before it's anything else. And I mean that pun intended. But what I would argue is, I think we've operated from the beginning, maybe I will even say the present, that we trusted community partners we were working alongside to see the value in us like we saw the value in them. And then when they didn't, some kind of way we got to a place where we may argue in a small setting, like singing to the choir, that we're valuable, but we didn't really do anything about it. Like you took your loss like a champ. You clocked out and you went home. You clocked back in and it became an acceptable culture, or well, they don't care about us anyway. So then tell me why you're comfortable with that.
Can you tell me a little bit about your column where you said that the profession needs to overcome volunteerism? I think it's so common, especially in this field, right? This like constant volunteer participatory. It's like celebrated among professionals. But do you mind just like expanding on that and explaining to the listeners kind of what this is that you're talking about?
Because I think culture is important as we drive, and especially as I become more and more conscious of coming to a conclusion of my board service, I really want to say the things out loud that we may not be talking as casually about as we should. And one of those things is volunteerism. Like, to volunteer is to choose the option or your own free will in the court to do X, Y, and Z. You know, I'm gonna show up. But think about this. If I gave you a list of 17 things that I volunteered for, like, let's back up. Being a president twice, the assumption is that I do good work. But what if that's an illusion? What if I've simply occupied a title or a position, sat on a committee, become this important person, you see a couple of Photoshop pictures, or I live in a magazine? So the automatic assumption is that I do good work.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw it on LinkedIn, right?
But what if that didn't show in my actual performance? What if things were not getting done? And a lot of times that's happened. So if I ask you to go X amount of years back and we talk about what happened then, but mind you, this person accomplished something forward facing that seems incredible because the achievement was there, but there was no impact. And so are we volunteering or are we advocating? Because volunteering says we cared enough to show up. And I'm not villainizing volunteering. It is the first and most basic step in involvement and engagement. But if it doesn't ever transition into advocacy, meaning that, yes, I volunteered, but we're still in the place we were when I started 40 years ago. No policies have changed. Classifications are still the same. We're no closer than we were yesterday. But you take, because I told you I've done this for 40 years, as though I'm the expert. But is my ego bigger than my impact? And so when we talk about plaques and achieving things, that's great for you as the individual. And what people fail to realize is when you're truly working as an advocate, that recognition is going to come as a symptom of the work you're doing. But when it's your focus, you're doing everybody a disservice. Because I've come in, I've made world history at this point. I'm done. I did what I needed to do. I changed the profession. And they're like, well, you didn't do anything. Exactly. I'll focus on that when I become irrelevant and somebody sitting in a peanut gallery that nobody remembers. I would rather you remember and be conscious of my impact and have no idea who I am than know exactly who I am, and you couldn't tell me two things I did when I was there.
I love that line between volunteering and advocating, right? Like there's so many pieces to that. There's strategy and commitment and vision. Like, do you have like a concrete example of what that difference looked like in your own experience, like within the ASRT, if you could?
100%. So I will tell you, like, everything listed or looked at when you send me some of the write-up stuff, none of that stuff belongs to me. I may have been seemingly more visible, but all it is a product of teamwork, shared vision, and a willingness to execute. It really gives me concern when I see individuals who claim to move mountains alone. It's like, it could have been your brainchild. You could have been the champion. I'll even argue maybe you took up the lion's share of it. But be honest about what that looks like. A lot of successes you see with the ASRT are a joint effort in between, these more than 200 volunteers being ushered in every year, incredible ASRT staff, just working ecosystem of champions. Some are more visible than others. So prime example, you talk about the difference between volunteering and advocacy. ASRT has been around for 106 years. Can you name 5 ASRT presidents?
Me?
Yep.
No, absolutely not.
But I'm telling you, that's common.
Well, I can count you twice though, so I got 2.
That's common, and it's not. So, but these are people who are volunteering at the highest level nationally and internationally.
Right. Absolutely.
So, volunteerism. So you see what I'm saying? Volunteerism. And that's not, let me be completely clear, that's not saying somebody didn't do a good job. We're just talking about disconnect, because when it comes to professional association, the caveat when it comes to advocacy is not contingent on membership, and it's not contingent on your engagement. If the ASRT is successful, even though there is about 157,000 members, there are almost 500,000 registered technologists and therapists through the credentialing agencies in the US. Everybody benefits. It's not exclusive to people who choose to be members. So what I'm arguing in this point, volunteerism. So you have individuals volunteering for you every day, but if you can't palpate or make tangible what the work is, then there's a gap there. But can't take away, people are showing up, they're volunteering. Advocacy. Advocacy is the almost 50,000 signatures when you're petitioning and pushing the OMB to, hey, we need you to look at our classification again. But you can't get 50,000 people to vote in the ASRT election.
Right. And so wait, so can you go back to those numbers from the beginning? How many members did you say there were?
There's about 157,000.
Okay, and then if I'm correct, it was the OMB got 42,000 comments.
42,000 comments. And so that's just from the ASRT. You had other entities pushing as well. The ART made a big push, and some of the other modality specific organizations push. And so I say that because the ASRT is the world's oldest and largest medical imaging and radiation therapy association that represents all modalities. It can seem different because the bulk of that population are radiographers because they outnumber most other modalities. But the ASRT has established representation for every modality and sector of medical imaging and radiation therapy that exists. And so we have to think about everybody. It really takes you out of what I call modality mentality and to recognize this. I don't do mammo, but I have to be conscious of what this legislation is. And I also have to be fluent when I have to argue it. The same thing with any modality that I'm not in, but it has taught me, it has furthered my appreciation for it. Being an IR technologist taught me the difference in between professional practice and a profession. Because you had so many skill sets in one room sharing a common goal. So I will argue at any time, yes, take pride in the modality that you specialize in, but don't not take purpose in your profession. That's the forest. Your tree is beautiful. That's great. Flowers blooming. Fruit is immaculate. But that is one tree. That is not the forest. And until we operate in a way that I can celebrate you and what you represent, and you can understand why I need your help, we will find ourselves running on a treadmill that's not even on and wondering why we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of like all of the comments to the OMB to reclassify RTs from technical personnel to professionals, am I correct that like only about once every 10 years, this classification?
So it does not happen often. And so the window is open. Let's make the story a little more impressive. Let's talk about, I'm going to, because not impressive about ASRT, impressive about the professionals who decide to show up. The call to action will recognize that this is happening. CEO, hey team, let's get this done. Started on a Thursday. It was closing on Monday by 5 Eastern. So in between Thursday, the end of the week, and Monday, you got 42,000 signatures from the ASRT populated petition alone. That's not including anybody else's statistics.
Okay, I mean, honestly, that like it colors it very different. And do you want to just explain to me like what are the changes if this goes through? Like if you win, for lack of a better term, or
a lot has changed since then. I'll say that a lot has changed since then. When you talk about classifications and statuses, but what would happen is it would put, take the profession out of, this hyper technical classification that really kind of dilutes what may look forward. You have some professionals who, his comments always grand. We were being arrogant. We were thinking too much of ourselves. What does it matter? I'm good where I'm at. And I'm good with that. But the problem that I have is don't be so interested or negligent with being good with preserving the profession and not be interested in building the profession you wish you would have inherited. You had a 30-year career and you have the audacity to say, why would we do this? Because you're not thinking about anybody coming behind you. That's what I tend to take issue with, and it is shown that a lot of our complacency has been, in my opinion, that you have professionals who found themselves satisfied with their career enough or not inspired enough to consciously or intentionally build the profession for those coming. And that's advancement. Half the work I do, I'm never gonna benefit from. Not in my career. Like it's just not But I'm okay with that because somebody built a bridge for me that didn't know me, didn't know I was coming, and they built it anyway, knowing they would never cross that bridge again. That bridge would never serve a purpose for them again. And so I'm obligated to build a bridge. What have I done? What have I done?
I mean, I feel like, I mean, and you definitely are, out there building bridges, right? Like you ran ads on NBC during the Olympics, I think, or during the qualifiers. Can you tell us a little bit about what the ads actually were too, and then also tell us how you did it?
So the Be Seen campaign was formulated as a board discussion. If we're successful as an organization, if we've been sustainable, what are we doing? That question was posed. So from that question or seed, developed into what we used to call ASRT presidential initiatives. But Dr. Pergola and the board as a team talked about, the president doesn't have initiatives. The ASRT has initiatives. The president may have priorities. But now I'm probably getting into semantics, but it's really important to me that we choose our words that properly communicate what goes on. But at any rate, at the time, Danny Gonzalez was becoming president, and so it became the Be Seen commercial became Danny Gonzalez's really his cornerstone initiative, and it inspired the world. It was the ASRT saying to professionals like, we see you on a very unignorable in a very unignorable way. And so, have this national commercial that's airing. I think now to date, we're like at 27 million, we reached 27 million. And it was important. So it went from the commercial and we expanded it to a campaign. So let's not just do a big splash. How for the next 5 to 10 years are we going to push this momentum in a way where it matters? So it went from this general ASRT commercial about the profession collectively to at the end of this year, 12 modalities have been filmed and highlighted commercials individually. And then, of course, now as a conversation, okay, we've done these commercials. We have this stuff circulating in the world. So what's our next big thing? And so we really tried to be very intentional about being more externally facing and not let our biggest roars be at ASRT annual meetings, because that's ineffective. Like you have to
just preach it to the choir.
Correct. And
literally,
so,
yeah.
Between that and so you see a collective of things. And so you'll hear me argue what I call the theory of mobilization. And so progressively, we have to achieve or demonstrate 5 things. The first and most basic thing is visibility. If people can't see you or not conscious that you're there, not know who you are, but just simply see you. It's like me asking you to pick up a pen. I'm happy to pick up the pen, but I don't see the pen. So visibility or being in sight is the most basic thing. And that really was the first stage of the Be Seen campaign. Then once they see you, now we're shifting towards you. So when they see you, what do you want them to be impressed by? What do you want them to recognize? So now game is on. So now you're on the microphone. You say you want to sing, let's go. What is our message? So what do we want them to know about us? So then when they see us, they start to recognize us. Okay, so third step, once they start to recognize us, they appreciate us because they know how we contribute to community and how we create value for them. So they see you, most basic. They recognize you, maybe can tell you something about it. You represent a brand or something. And then 3, now they appreciate you because they know the value you create. So when you create value, people are more willing to advocate with and for you. Professionals are not the only people voting on policies, procedures, and legislation. You want to be able to transition supporters internally and externally to when they can see you, recognize who you are, appreciate your value, to fight for and with you, because you cannot win the battle keeping it internal alone. And then the last step, which is advancement. You see change and success start to happen because you see a community in motion. Nothing about those. I didn't use any buzzwords. I didn't tell you anything immaculate. Those are 5 very simple words: visibility, recognition, appreciation, advocacy, and advancement. In that order specifically. Is functional, is plain, has always been doable. And then the only other thing to it, what we have to do in order for that to be more of a practice than aspirational is we have to be able to measure them. As long as we can measure those 5 things, so visibility, or the website views going up, people interacting with your website more, something as simple as that. Do you see an recognition? Do you see an uptake in medical imaging radiation therapy programs? You see more people coming to the field. What does it look like? Appreciation. People recognize that it's NRTW, or people recognize that you are the reason that the mother who had a mammogram and early detected breast cancer is home for the holidays, or the person that you love that was in a radiation therapy suite was never alone because the radiation therapist was with them. Like things like that. And then advocacy, that people understand why it's important that policies and procedures have to represent not the best interest of the profession, but the best interest of the public. That the people who are delivering this area of care, this is why they are clinically competent and educationally prepared. That no, not just anybody can walk off the street and do this. And no, not with your qualifications and as awesome as you are in your lane, can you veer over, especially without a signal light, and jump in mine. Right. And then you start to see, and then advancement, you start to see things change because you have living progress. And so those are the things to me that, become incredibly important as we push, because if we can't measure it, it's aspirational at best, at very best.
I want to pivot a tiny bit. So, you've spoken a lot about, not just you, everybody right now is talking about the tech shortage. We know that there's like a massive bottleneck in education, right? We've got massive waiting lists of people trying to get into programs. We've got healthcare facilities helping to pay for people's programs, trying to get techs out here. And I think CT vacancy rates have hit 19.5% or something, but radiography is improving. And you've talked about this as a shortage cycle and the cyclical nature of it, which I feel like that's a unique take that I have not heard too many others bring up. We're talking about the shortage, I'm not putting words in other guests' mouths, but it very often feels like we're talking about it like it's this brand new problem that, it's been going on for a minute. But, it feels like the conversation is always focuses to this fixed point in time, rather than when I hear you talking about it, it is more about the cycle.
I think so. I want to be fair. I probably get more information about the profession in general than the majority of people, no matter how long they've been.
I think that's probably fair.
Just because of where I am. And so I have to look, managers, directors, vice presidents, people who are operationally dealing are closest to the fire. So it's a here and now thing. It's like being in crises. So I understand why that is a working reality you're dealing with every day. I'm not taking away from that. What my argument is, I think there are two things we talk about, and it drives me wild because we talk about them like problems, and they're not problems. Problems are things that have a fix. That is my argument. Problems are things that have a fix. This is not the first time there's been a shortage. We're not the only profession in a shortage. It will come again. My question is, how are we preparing ourselves to either reduce the impact that the shortage has on our profession or our ability to deliver, because we'll never be able to eliminate it. Because people are going to be impressed by healthcare. They're going to flee from healthcare. People will retire. People will join. So this is a factor. So it's not a problem. It's a factor. And so how are we now is, I would argue it's really reactive. We already knew the baby boomer exit was coming. A lot of things got exaggerated by COVID because not only were the baby boomers exiting, people were saying, yeah, life's too short. I'm not doing it. And so now we're back in a place, because I remember a time where, we're putting out too many, that the market was oversaturated. So it is cyclical. So I'm not arguing it doesn't have a negative impact. I'm arguing a problem can be fixed. A factor has to be attended to. I feel the same way about encroachment. Encroachment is not a problem. Encroachment is never going away. Encroachment is a factor. As long as you create value, there will be a fox that tries to come into the hen house.
When you're talking about encroachment, like within the field, can you be a bit more specific for me?
Yeah, so I'm saying, so I think a lot of times, so what is the problem? Well, you have Persona X that they're pushing legislation in statewide to read, interpret, order medical imaging. So it's not just us, it's a service line thread from the radiologists on down. But you don't hear people going on a nationwide heist of Goodwills. No, you hear about people robbing banks, jewelry stores. People impede on valuable things. And as long as you create value as a profession, somebody is going to try it. That's not a problem. That's a factor. But my thing is, are you so good at what you do that you can show others that it only looks easy because I make it look easy, and that we're putting out research, we're being professionally represented to where we are producing more resources and citations than we're consuming. A professional said that at a meeting, because that's not I don't even want to pretend that it's one of the most offensive things I've ever heard is a professional I respect so much out of New Jersey. And he says, our problem as a profession is we consume more information than we produce. So when it's time for people to refer to our profession, we haven't been the cited source. I was so offended by that because I couldn't argue it. You go and look for, some peer-reviewed things, or you're looking for let's say you're putting together an argument. And a lot of times I remember from grad school that I had to pull from a profession because it was transferable. It was kind of universal, and I had to make it my own. But the credentials at the end of that author's name looks nothing like mine. Not saying I'm not making any excuse, and I'm not giving that as a justification, but that's always the argument while I was working.
Because honestly, talking to you is like remarkably refreshing, right? And congratulations. You're a breath of fresh air, it feels like. And like, can you just tell, like, I understand why you got voted in a special election to be the ASRT president a second time in a row. Can you tell me just like how and why you went for a second term? Did you get pushed into it? Like, how did that happen? Because it was unprecedented.
I held out to the midnight hour, and I try to say it's in the best way I can say it. I will, because I've been approached by some members and just asked, because we're having a special election because the guy who was getting ready to become the next president resigned in order to go and actually work for the ASRT organization. And what a lot of people don't realize is you cannot apply for a job. Like, he couldn't even apply for the job without resigning. And I think I don't say I took it personal, not personal in a negative way, but that was a person I was really going to miss, because that was somebody who was always willing to stand with me on this or oppose me in a very objective way. And so we just worked very well together. So anyways, he resigns. Now you got to have a special election. So this has never happened, or it's never been recorded, because what's happening is, and a lot of people didn't realize, whoever won this position was legitimately going to be a president-elect for 2 months and then be elevated to the office of president at a time that things were so pivotal. It's all my professional career in this atmosphere, it's been seen as a taboo that you don't enter back onto the board. I think I've had some serious conversations with some people, some mentors that I really respect that were more distal from it. And they felt like the most natural thing to do was for me to go about it. And that was a big decision because this is very time consuming, very worthy for sure. And so I had to think about what that looked like. And so two things were going on. And I think this is the first time I'm ever saying this out loud publicly. I had a very big fear that doing this would give an impression that I am probably the most disinterested in. And that is that president should return to office just because. I think the best person for the job should be given a fair opportunity to do the job. But if you're just doing it for whatever glory you need, that is a gross disservice. And I have written that in articles, and I have been very clear that my being here a second time allowed for this year not to be about the uniqueness of a president, but to truly treat this presidential position like business as usual, to focus on mentoring the incoming president, Marissa Mangrum, and to allow the ASRT staff not to have a new run of projects. So Dr. Pergola and I talked about, she says, well, when I won, she says, well, what does this look like? I said, I won't have presidential initiatives. So what do you mean? We're already doing great work. This is where I completely agree with you that we need to figure out the things that we need to stop that have been going on for years that are just basically on autopilot and that it's not serving us. The things that we need to continue that we do very well. Because if you have a good initiative, that's not going to be accomplished in a year's term. And then the things we need to start doing. And so this allowed for the ASRT to take a breath without having to be focused on the pageantry of a new president. I've been a lot more behind the scenes this year than I was in my first presidential year. I didn't want this year to be about a president. I wanted it to be about the profession. And I really hope as I transition out that I hope that people feel as though I did what I said I would do.
I feel like I mean, who am I to judge? But I feel like you succeeded in that. Or at least you come across as succeeding in that.
I hope so. I mean, you don't ever feel like it's still, and people don't think this. I don't in here because it's ongoing work and it's every day. I don't ever stop to say, "Oh, we did it." Even when we succeed in things, I'm like, "Cool, great, on to the next task." But I would hypocritically advise somebody else not to do that. Like, take a moment to celebrate. But I'm very hypocritical when it's about that because I'm like, nope, I'm on a time clock. We got to get this going. Like, we got things to do. I argue, and I've said this in another podcast, success is as much of a imposter as failure. Success says you made it. You don't have to go any further. Failure says you'll never make it. You can't do it. Both of those things stop progress. So I try not to give too much of my commitment. I appreciate both, but it's really they're twins.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful place to wrap things up I'm not succeeding or failing today, but we'll stop it here. Brandon Smith, two-time president of the ASRT, radiological technologist. Brandon, thank you so much for being here today. It's been so fantastic to have you.
I appreciate it. No, I appreciate you for reaching out and the invitation. Hopefully the conversation was decent and hopefully people can walk away with a different perspective.
Frame by Frame Rethink Imaging is brought to you by Imalogics. Here, you'll find engaging interviews with thought leaders, experts, and patients, sharing stories that showcase the transformative power of medical imaging. To discover how Imalogics is rethinking imaging in healthcare, visit imalogics.com. Be sure to subscribe to Frame by Frame Rethink Imaging on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And from all of us here at Imalogics, thanks for tuning in.